The living owe it to those who no longer can speak to tell their story for them, said the poet Czesław Miłosz. The living owe it to those who no longer can speak to tell their story for them. In part, this is what we do here on All Souls Day. We tell the stories, and I hope that after church you will tell someone the story of the person that is conjured in your memory today. I read a story recently about a woman who turned 50 and, feeling the weight of her mortality, decided to honor her grandmother and return her grandmother's remains to her native Ukraine. The only thing was she knew that her grandmother had come from a place as a Jew that had tried to erase her memory, and she also did not know where the remains of her grandmother were. So she asked her mother, and her mother said, "I put the ashes in a Maxwell House coffee can and stashed it in the garage." She did her research. She realized the airlines didn't take kindly to someone stepping on the plane with the ashes of the remains of someone in a coffee can. So she decided when she found the remains, she would put them in a cosmetic case and bring them to the town where she thought her grandmother was from. The only problem was she couldn't find the coffee can with the ashes in it. So she asked her husband, "Have you seen the coffee can with my grandmother's ashes in it?" And he sheepishly said, "I might have thrown it out in the spring cleaning." Her mother said, "No, we stashed it in the basement with the things that she brought, the samovar, the tea server she brought from Russia. When she went into the basement, she couldn't find that either, so she decided to go anyway. And she went to the town and she looked for the Jews who were buried there, and no one could help her. The woman at the registrar's office said, "You're lucky your grandmother got out. You might never have been born." And then she found someone who said, "No, the Jews were buried in that part of town," and so she went there only to find that the Soviets had built an apartment building on top of the burial ground. An old woman came by and said, "The dead are coming back." She wasn't sure what that meant, and then the woman pointed and said, "The rains have washed away the edge of the tomb." The taxi driver quickly crossed himself and said a prayer. She went home, and she realized that no matter where her grandmother's remains were, the most important thing was that they were in her heart. That her grandmother remained in a place no one could throw out or bury under buildings. All Souls Day always challenges me to understand what life and death really means, what it might mean to end up in a coffee can in the garage or under a building, what it might mean to have lived the life I live and then possibly have no one remember me. You see, today isn't just a day that follows the fun and playfulness of Halloween, itself a nod to death and fear and mortality. It is a day to ponder the souls of our lives and what quality of soul we live with. And it challenges us to remember that half of life is grief and loss. That blessed are those who mourn might be a more necessary message than rejoice in the Lord, because there is no real rejoicing if we are running from loss. That is why All Souls Day is what it is in this church, an important moment. It is why I brought this ritual of the pictures and the candles here from the little chapel I served in Boston, where children led their parents up each year for Picture Day, they called it. And each, in turn, with 50 members in a little chapel on Beacon Hill, would say, "This was my grandmother, her name was Esther." Or, "This was my cousin John." Or, "This was my dog." And I remember one time when little Mark Perry went to put the picture on the altar and must have caught a button and almost pulled the whole thing into the aisle. But more so, I remember how this marking was so important. How it was important to the people who came to speak and honor the names of the dead. You see, All Souls is a comprehensive day that takes us to the outer circle of sympathy, emphasizing the ties which unite us to all human beings. It demands a kindness, a feeling towards all those who are part of our lives. It points to souls, not the weighty souls that might leave at the end of life, but soul as in heart and soul. The guilty, the shame, the love, the grief-stricken, the beautiful, the damaged, the holy souls, each and all who are part of our lives. Souls that we have known intimately in the chambers of our homes, and souls we have fought tooth and nail with or envied. Souls who reared us or cared for us or even hurt us, or all three. Today they stare back at us through the veil of time, and we remember them. My colleague, now a retired UU minister, Richard Gilbert, wrote, "We belong to the great community of all souls, a long procession of humanity, stretching back into time beyond our comprehension, sharing life with us in this time and space. We are privileged," he said, "to be part of such a race of creatures who have marveled at the miracle of birth, who have found meaning in the midst of life, and who stand humbly before the mystery of death. We are servants of life," he said, "and wish to be counted among those who will work for justice, love, and compassion." What I like about this statement is his emphasis on belonging. We belong to the great community of souls. It is our privilege to be part of the great community of souls, to stand humbly among the great community of souls, to be counted among the great community of souls. Yet it is something we forget so easily. We are all busy. We work through our lives. We have things to do. We have needs to conquer. Yet we forget that we are part of a great community of souls. And this culture is so good at helping us to forget that, what I call the I culture, the iPhone, iPad, iBreakfast, iLife, iWorld culture. Culture we live in that says our I-ness is much more important than our we-ness. More people every day are buying into this notion that we must be unique, that we have to have some personalized notion in the world. Every time I follow my son into the Nike store with his tongue leaning out of his mouth as he looks at these beautiful sneakers, I stop at the booth that is about personalizing your sneakers, where you can change the colors and the fabrics and the swoosh so that you might be differentiated from the others on the playground. You see, we live in this culture that tells us this is important. Someone told me recently they thought the recent shootings in schools and in movie theaters and elsewhere had everything to do with people needing to be in the spotlight. You see, if we are a people lost in a sea of others, we desire to be famous, we desire to be noticed. And the more we bow and scrape to the I world, the more we will realize that we are not famous, that we are rarely noticed, that we aren't in the spotlight, and so we will act out to make that not so. Forgetting the old adage, we are privileged to be part of the community of all souls, to stand humbly before the community of all souls, to be counted among the community of all souls. To counter the I world, it requires us to do two things. To understand in the moment what we have, and to recognize that the lives that came before us matter. That is why I love this gorgeous poem by Lee Young Lee. We are dust, the first three words. But in the meantime, we make the bed and we remember dreams. If we are lucky, we listen to each other's dreams. And importantly, we learn to recognize what we love, what it takes to tend what isn't ours, and not abandon what we know we will have to relinquish in the end of life because we fear the ending. Lee asks us to attend to the things we share with the ones we love, to attend what he calls a joint and fragile keeping. One day we'll lie down and not get up, he says, and we guard so strongly all that we must surrender. You know this lesson. You know that it's important to honor what we have in life. I hope I am not a voice crying out in a wilderness to try to convince you of the value of human life lived in the world. It seems to me we may be losing a grip on that a little bit in our I-world culture, where we value the gods of wealth and fame over life itself, however mundane it might be, where we value happiness so much we don't make room for sadness and grief. We saw this week in the tragedy of the wife of the man who was attacked on White Rock Trail, the machete murder. See, she said she couldn't see going on without her husband, and she took her own life. Now, I'm not condemning her choice that she made, but without knowing much about it, it seems like not giving time to grief was possibly the wrong thing to do. I hope I'm wrong when I think she did this because she didn't value her life enough to try to pass through the channels of grief. I hope I'm wrong when I think that maybe she had internalized so much oppression that she couldn't see the value of her life beyond the role she had with her husband. I don't know. But it made me grieve and it made me sad to read that story. And it made me remember how great and valued a gift life lived is. And to add to that challenge is the challenge that we remember how important the lives who came before us are. All Souls Day is what we do to do that. We remember we have inherited an ancient wisdom wrought from generations of engagement and struggle. We call upon those who confronted great mysteries. We seek a great cloud of witnesses to give our lives meaning beyond the I worlds we create. That is why the story I started with matters, because it's so easy to hide the can of ashes away because we can't face loss or we hold a grudge. It is easy to bury the dead under buildings so we don't have to remember them or why they ended up there. That is why today is so important as we light candles and bring photos and make a beautiful tapestry of human faces we can hold together. Annie Dillard famously said, "We are here to witness to creation, to notice each other's beautiful faces and complex natures so that creation need not play to an empty house." I would say we also need the faces of the dead to fill this house of creation with attention and love and the knowledge that we are not alone. Today, as a church, we collectively mourn and we collectively rejoice. Mourning the losses and rejoicing the memories. In a world that includes so many lives, ours and theirs, we have lit candles and we have built this altar to remember those who have come before. And so as we do each year, now I invite you to join me in a practice of remembrance. Join me in a time to bless those who are mourning, those whose memories are fresh with the faces of the dead. I invite all those who are mourning a death, someone in your life who died in this last year. I invite you to stand now. I invite you, those who mourn a death this year, to stand. You know who you are. And those standing, if you wish to be stabilized one way or another, feel free to request a hand from someone near you. We are so afraid of being touched. For you, we read this meditation from the Jewish tradition, and I ask you all to join me in the response, which is, we remember them. Bless our memories now as we remember them. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and the warmth of summer, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us as we remember them. To those of you who are standing, I say, mourners, we are your ballast if you let us be. We are here for you. We acknowledge you today. A blessing on you. You may be seated. And today we name those members of this church who have died since All Souls Day last year. We present their pictures here on the screens of the sanctuary. They are John Jagger, Dr. Bertrand Moore, Ellen Solander, Howard D. Watt, Jane Wilson, and Pat Tharp. And I invite you all now to speak aloud names of those you brought a picture of today or remembering in this sanctuary. Will you speak into the cloud of witnesses the names that you bring today? called all those names and those lives in our hearts and those that remain silent in our hearts. Let us join together in prayer. Blessed are those who mourn and those who know loss. Blessed are those who know a leftover love, those who may have lost trust in the world but can find hope in seeds of remembrance or acts of friendship and affection. Blessed are those mourners who stood today in our midst, who rose to honor the passing of a person in their lives. May they be held by us today and each day. Blessed are they who can be held. Blessed are those who hold dearly to life and know what it takes to tend what isn't ours for the having. Blessed are those who do not fear what we all must relinquish, but rejoice in life and all its blessings. Blessed are those who mourn, and the great cloud of witnesses we remember today. And let the people say, Amen.